Live different from other digital audio workstations. So, you know, there's things like Pro Tools, Logic, Digital Performer, Sonar, Cubase, GarageBand, Acid. All of those programs work in this traditional linear paradigm of audio editing and arranging. So all that means is we're left to right in the timeline. So this is called the arrangement view in Ableton Live. It should be very familiar if you've worked with any of those other programs. Ableton does pretty much everything that those other programs will do, i.e. this arrangement page. What makes Ableton different is the session view, which you can get to by hitting the tab key or clicking on one of these up here. I don't know what you call these. The horizontal and vertical views.
Session views.
Session view and range view selection buttons. Also really important to know right off the bat, this lower left-hand corner is the info view. It's super helpful. You know, there's so many different buttons and features in Live. If you ever don't know exactly what you're doing or you need to be reminded of something, turn on the info view. This lower left-hand triangle will hide and reveal the info view. And what this does is when you move your cursor over various parameters, you'll notice the info view updates and tells you, you know, what that knob, button, whatever device does. So it can really help remind you, especially when you're learning the program. Even if you've been using it for years, you'll forget.
Especially in Live 8 that came out with all these new audio effects. Like there's crazy new parameters, stuff that like I still am not. There's just a lot of new stuff to discover, and they'll tell you what every parameter on every effect does and how it applies to that particular effect. So it helps out a lot.
Totally. So the view in Ableton is always customizable. Anytime you move your cursor over the edges of the screen, you can sort of resize and adjust these parameters. So if I go over here, I can resize the width of the tracks. I can move my browser window over. It's pretty awesome and customizable. Okay, also like all those other digital audio workstations, we have the mixer view. So this should be super familiar to all of you guys. This is your volume fader, pan pots, track activator. I consider this a mute switch. Solo button, record, enable. You've got sends, returns. This is our I/O, which we'll go over in a second. So all of that stuff should be really familiar to you guys using these other software applications. So what really stands out about Ableton and that none of these other programs have is this session view matrix. It looks sort of like an Excel spreadsheet. Basically, we have our individual cells. Tracks are up and down, just like an analog mixer. The important thing to note is that you can only play one clip in a track at a time. So this is an example song that I'm actually in the middle of working on. I just decided to bring out to show you guys. You'll notice this is a little synth part. As soon as I go to the next clip, it will mute that previously playing clip. It'll only play one sound per time per track. So then we've also got these scene selections, which will trigger all of the cells in the row. So that's really helpful when you're doing something like this, where I've laid out my resampled synths, synth pulse sounds, bass, more keyboards, drums on the end. I've got the scenes are sort of separating the sections of the song. So like the first scene would be my introduction. And then I can step through my arrangement almost in a linear left to right fashion, but I'm going up, down. So you can see me sort of step through the song. If you have an APC 40 controller, it's really the same thing that you see on the screen. So I can go through here and go through my scenes and sort of work on my arrangement in this non-linear fashion. You know, I can step down to the end of the song or somewhere in the middle of the song, go back up, replay, you know, earlier portion of the song. It's kind of, when I play live with this setup, it's this really interesting production and kind of DJ hybrid. Because I have these separate tracks in my session view, I can get in there and mute things and really play with the composition and the sounds. So as opposed to DJing, you know, a full track, I have, you know, supreme control over this. Another really great thing about the matrix and going through your arrangements is I can trigger different clips together, and I can hear maybe what the keyboards from the verse sound like with the bass from the chorus and the drums from, you know, another section. So you can really get creative and just try out so many different combinations. So this is really my favorite thing about Ableton Live, and you can come up with what I call happy accidents very easily by just experimenting with things. Sometimes I just mess around, and you'll be surprised. Because Ableton keeps everything in tempo according to the global quantize button, which is up here. If you hit this drop-down menu, you'll see all these different musical subdivisions that you can quantize the audio, the devices, various parameters in Live. It's really intelligent that way because they figure most people using Live are going to be doing beat-based music. So they've really thought this through. Of course, you can select none and have no quantize and just play everything live. So if you're doing beatless music or more ambient experimental stuff, you can always turn the features off.
Show them real fast.
Yeah, so the global quantize in the session view is going to affect the clip launch sort of update rate. So if I set it to quarter notes, no matter when I hit or trigger a clip or a scene, it's going to wait and quantize that to the quarter notes. So this is a really cool way basically to never mess up. Especially if I put this to 1 bar, assuming all of my loops are 1 bar loops. You can just step through, it will always change on the 1. You can see my bars and beats counter right up here. So if I start at 1, 2, 3, 4, no matter what, it's only going to change on the 1. That makes sense, right? And of course you can get into things like 30-second notes. Now I can re-trigger up to 30-second notes, and it's going to keep everything in time. So that's really useful when you start programming beats and that kind of stuff. What else on that bit? Before we talk about routing.
I think that's pretty much it. Any questions about the session view? So
the basics. Yeah, we're going to dive deeper into the features, but for now, that's the basic concept, right? About how things work. I suppose now would be good. Let's talk about routing and everything. The routing in Live is crazy flexible. So over here, we have these hide and reveal buttons, which will show different features and views in the session view or arrangement view. So let's go over this real quick. If I disengage all of it, you see we basically just have our Excel spreadsheet, clip slots and everything. We can hit I/O, and it will bring up our input-output section of the mixer. So this is where we decide where audio is coming into the track, where it's going out to, and different monitoring options for recording. So if you look at all my options here, you can quite literally route anything to anything in terms of audio in Live. So it's pretty nice. Times you might especially want to do this is like if you were recording a whole drum kit. Typically you have 5 or more microphones on a drum set. Let's say you wanted to apply compression or a reverb effect to the whole drum kit. If you have the 5 individual tracks, you can route all 5 tracks into another blank audio track that you'll then apply your compression and reverb. And you can control the volume of all those mics at once, or the effects, etc. So really cool stuff. We'll talk about resampling in a little bit. Basically, resampling is going to record internally whatever output is happening at the master output bus. So that being said, the master output bus is this on the far right. Basically, whatever is going on here is what is coming out of your speakers and you're listening to. So that's really good to know. And if you have resampling chosen here, that is going to set this track up to listen to whatever is happening at the master output bus. So there's all kinds of situations where you might want to do that. We'll talk about that once we start talking about